A 16-year-old girl is suing her guardian, accusing her of financial fraud, deprivation of housing, and trying to force her to have an abortion. An orphan left without parents claims that her aunt embezzled money intended for her maintenance, evicted her from her apartment, and used her funds for personal purposes. During the trial, shocking family secrets emerge, and the guardianship authorities are suspected of negligence. The court's decision could change her life forever. Will she gain the long-awaited freedom, or will she remain defenseless against the system? Chapter 1. Introduction. There was morning silence in the New York State District Court, broken only by the sounds of court staff's footsteps and the rustling of papers. Large windows let in sunlight, casting long shadows on the oak tables. Today, a case was heard here that has attracted public attention, the emancipation hearing for 16-year-old Karen Paulson. The spectator benches were occupied by journalists and several representatives of social services. In this room, the fate of a girl was being decided, who was perhaps destined to gain freedom, but at what cost? Judge Jessica Rivers, a woman in her 50s with piercing eyes and stern features, took her seat. She flipped through the case files before tapping the hammer on the wooden stand. The court session is declared open. The case is Karen Paulson v. Lauren Martin. A petition for the emancipation of a minor is being considered. I ask the parties to introduce themselves. A tense silence reigned in the hall. Karen herself spoke first. She was a thin girl with brown hair braided in a loose braid. She was wearing a modest outfit, dark jeans, and a light sweater. She took a deep breath, trying to suppress her excitement. Your Honor, my name is Karen Paulson. I am 16 years old. I live separately from my guardian, work, pay rent, and want to be recognized as emancipated. The judge watched her carefully, noting the confident tone of her voice, but the girl's tense shoulders betrayed her nervousness. Karen clasped her fingers together, waiting for a reaction. Lauren Martin, her aunt, spoke next. A middle-aged woman with delicate features and cold eyes pursed her lips contemptuously. Lauren Martin, I am Karen's legal guardian. She spoke with restraint, but there was irritation in her voice. The judge nodded and turned her gaze to the representative of the Department of Children and Families. Janet Crawford, New York State DCFS, Your Honor. Rivers looked at all three of them thoughtfully, then folded her hands on the table. Karen, tell the court why you think you should be declared emancipated. Take a deep breath. The girl looked straight into the judge's eyes and spoke. After the death of my parents 3 years ago, my aunt took me into custody. Then I thought that she would help me, but it turned out that this was not the case. What do you mean? The judge clarified. Karen swallowed, fighting back the flood of emotions. I owned the apartment left after my parents. My aunt sold her own and moved in with me with her family, her husband and son. They took up the entire living space and left me only the kitchen. I slept on the floor and was often sick. Eventually, when I went to college in Albany, I had to move into a dorm. I pay for it myself. My aunt took the money that I was entitled to as an orphan for herself. The judge looked at the DCFS representative. Mistress Crawford, are you aware of this? The woman hesitated. Some complaints were received, but we did not receive confirmation. So, in essence, you had no control over where this girl's money went. The judge interrupted sharply. Crawford was noticeably nervous, but didn't have time to answer. Lauren Martin couldn't stand it. This is a lie, she clasped her hands. I always took care of her, provided her with food and shelter as best I could. What she says is an exaggeration. The judge looked at her intently. Is that so, Miss Paulson? Karen shook her head. Am I going? Yes. Once a week, she gave me $20 or $30, but that was not enough. I worked to survive. The judge frowned. You were entitled to payments of $900 per month. Did you receive them? No. Mrs. Martin, where did this money go? Aunt Karen swallowed nervously. The judge fixed a piercing gaze on her, and tension reigned in the room. The trial had just begun, but it was already clear that this matter was far from being as simple as it might seem at first glance. Chapter 2. Plaintiff's Statement. Karen took a deep breath. This moment contained her entire struggle years of suffering, loneliness, and attempts to survive without support. Now she had to prove to the court that she was old enough to manage her own life. Judge Rivers waited patiently for her story. Karen, you said your aunt used your survivor benefits. Can you explain how exactly? The judge asked a question. The girl nodded. She rummaged through the folder of documents she had brought with her and handed over several sheets of paper through the bailiff. Here is a statement of the account that was opened in my name. According to the law, this money should have gone towards my maintenance, but no one gave it to me. The aunt disposed of them, claiming that she was using them for the common good. The judge scanned the papers, then looked at Lauren Martin. Mrs. Martin, it states that most of the funds were spent on personal purchases, utility bills for your new apartment, as well as school and activities for your son, right? Lauren shrugged her shoulders. This is not true. I did pay the bills, but Karen also used housing, water, electricity. I couldn't leave her hungry. The judge frowned. Karen, what was the reality? The girl clenched her hands into fists to calm herself down and spoke in an even voice. The reality was this. After the death of my parents, I lost not only them, but also my normal life. In my own apartment, I became superfluous. The rooms were occupied by the aunt, her husband, and son. They left me the kitchen. I slept on the floor, where the drafts penetrated to my bones. They didn't even bother to give me a bed. Over time, I began to interfere. My aunt hinted that it would be better for me to live in a college dormitory since I entered Albany. In the end, she invited me to leave, leaving me no choice. A tense silence hung in the hall. The judge crossed her arms on the table. You moved into the dorm. Who paid for it? Me, from my salary. Are you working? Yes, I work in a studio. Here is my employment contract. The bailiff handed the judge a new document. Karen continued speaking, gaining confidence. I sew clothes, and it helps me stay afloat. I make about $1,000 a month, plus I have a college scholarship. With this money, I pay for the hostel, food, and personal expenses. The judge nodded, noting that the girl was not just looking for independence, but was already leading an independent life. It turns out that you are financially independent. But tell me, did you receive at least some financial assistance from your guardian? Karen pursed her lips. Sometimes my aunt gave me $20 or $30 a week for food, she said. But when I came to her for groceries, I was given a bag containing only expired sausage and bread. I couldn't eat it. I ended up spending my money on normal food. The judge looked at the DCFS representative. Did you know about this? Janet Crawford adjusted her glasses as if hoping to hide behind the frames. We have not received such information. We were assured that Karen was provided with everything she needed. So you didn't conduct any checks. The judge clarified with a hint of reproach. We did, but Crawford hesitated. We relied on the guardian's reports. Karen shook her head. Your Honor, if they had asked me, things would have been different. But no one asked. The judge looked at the girl with interest. Are you saying that no one talked to you? No. All they did was come to the apartment, talk with the aunt, and leave. They didn't even ask me how I was living. Lauren Martin exploded. This is a lie. I took care of her as best I could. I fed her, gave her a roof over her head. She's just ungrateful. The judge sharply raised her hand, demanding silence. I'm not here to sort out personal conflicts. I'm establishing the facts. She turned back to Karen. Tell me why you didn't ask for help earlier. Karen's voice became quieter. I was afraid that if I went to social services, they would send me to a shelter. I didn't want to lose the only thing left of my parents, the apartment. I hoped I could handle it. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then turned her attention back to Lauren. You rent out the apartment that Karen owns for $1,500 a month. Where does this money go? Aunt swallowed nervously. To pay utility bills and to support the family. The judge turned her gaze to Karen. Do you get any part of this money? The girl shook her head. Not a cent. The judge made a note on the file. Clear. Now let's move on to the next question. Karen sighed. The hardest part was yet to come. Chapter 3. Guardian's response. A tense silence reigned in the courtroom. Lauren Martin shifted nervously from foot to foot. She had already adjusted the collar of her jacket several times, as if it was tight, but in fact it was becoming tight for her. Her ward has just given her version of events, and now it's time to defend herself. Judge Jessica Rivers fixed her with a cold gaze. Mrs. Martin, you heard your niece's statement. What can you say in response? Lauren hesitated for a second, then raised her chin, adopting a defensive posture. Your Honor, this is pure absurdity. I took care of Karen as best I could. Yes, we had difficulties, but I never left her without help. The judge nodded, waiting for her to continue. I took her into custody after her parents died. I had to quit my job to provide her with a stable life. Of course, it was not easy for me because I have my own child. Karen crossed her arms but didn't say anything. The judge made a note in her notes. Miss Martin, you said you cared about Karen. What exactly did this mean? I fed her, paid utility bills, bought clothes. She lived in our house and enjoyed all the benefits of the family. The judge raised her eyebrows. In her own apartment. Lauren faltered slightly. Well, yes, we all lived there. I had to sell my old apartment so we could renovate. Why exactly in her apartment? Why not rent a place or leave her at least one room? Lauren swallowed nervously. This was a temporary option. We thought that we would soon move to a new house, but construction was delayed. It's not my fault. The judge listened to her carefully, then looked at the documents. You rent out this apartment for $1,500 a month, but Karen stated that she does not receive a penny of this money. Where do the funds go? The guardian blushed. To pay bills, to pay for groceries, to support our family. So the money that should have gone to Karen went to support your family. Lauren nodded frantically. But she is also part of the family. I didn't throw it out into the street. She herself decided to go to the hostel. Karen narrowed her eyes. Have you decided? Or was I simply left with no choice? Lauren flushed, but refrained from commenting. The judge turned her gaze to the DCFS representative. Miss Crawford, is your organization aware of how survivor benefits were spent? The woman with glasses looked clearly uncomfortable. We didn't know all the details. We proceeded from the reports that Miss Martin provided. The judge frowned. You stated that Karen was provided with everything she needed. How did you verify this information? Our employees visited the house. Crawford began hesitantly. Have you spoken to Karen herself? The judge interrupted her. Well, not always. We usually communicated with the guardian. Karen snorted. So they just listened to the aunt and left. I tried to talk to them, but no one listened to me. Lauren exploded. Don't you dare say that. I did everything I could, if you weren't so stubborn. The judge tapped her gavel on the table. Enough. This is a trial, not a family dispute. Miss Martin, I need to be clear. What were your financial obligations to Karen, and why does she claim she did not receive support? Lauren straightened up. I spent money on her. Maybe not the way she wanted, but that doesn't mean I abandoned her. The judge looked at Karen. Do you confirm that you did not receive adequate support? Yes, I lived on my own money, and the fact that my aunt allegedly helped me is a lie. The judge sighed and looked at Lauren. And one last thing. Mrs. Martin, do you know that Karen is pregnant? Lauren flushed. Yes, and this is yet another proof that she is not capable of making adult decisions. She can't even take care of herself, but she wants to live alone. Karen raised her head. I can take care of myself and my child. Unlike you, I do not use other people's money for my own needs. Lauren opened her mouth, but the judge stopped her with a gesture. Enough. Now everything is clear to me. We move on to the next stage of the hearing. Lauren pursed her lips but remained silent. Her face was tense, like a taut string. The only question is when it will break. Chapter 4. Family Secrets Revealed. After the judge's words, a tense silence fell in the courtroom. Lauren Martin sat with her lips pressed together, her hands shaking, clutching the hem of her jacket. Karen kept her cool, but you could see her knuckles turn white as she clenched her fingers tightly. Judge Rivers clasped her hands. looked at both sides, and said in an even voice, "Since we've touched on the issue of finances and custody, it's time to find out if there were any other irregularities in this case. Miss Martin, you claim to have cared for Karen, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Now I want to hear the whole truth." Lauren swallowed nervously and looked away. "I've already said everything." The judge raised her eyebrows. "I doubt it. You claim that Karen herself wanted to leave home, but why then did she not receive legal payments? Why did you live in a hostel, paying for it from your salary? Why wasn't the money from renting her apartment used for her needs?" Lauren opened her mouth, but closed it as if she was afraid to say too much. Karen's voice broke the silence. "Because I was never family to her. I was a problem, a burden that needed to be gotten rid of." The judge looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" Karen bit her lip, as if deciding whether to speak further. But then, taking a deep breath, she continued, "Your Honor, I have been trying for a long time to understand why my aunt treats me this way. Why was I a stranger in my own home? Why was I pushed out into the dormitory? Why was I not given a penny from payments? And then I found out the truth." Lauren turned sharply to her. "Don't you dare." The judge tapped the table with her gavel. "Mrs. Martin, one more behavior like this, and I will reprimand you." Lauren leaned back in her chair, but her face turned pale. Karen continued, "I found old letters to my mother. In them, she wrote about family conflicts, that her sister was always jealous of her. Mom got married early, gave birth to me and Lauren. Her life didn't turn out the way she wanted. It always seemed to her that her mother took everything from her. Her parents' love, luck, money. When my parents died, she had the chance to take the last thing that was left of them." The judge looked at Lauren. "Do you confirm that you had long-standing conflicts with your sister?" "It doesn't matter." Lauren muttered. "This is directly relevant," the judge said firmly. "So answer." Lauren nodded reluctantly. "Yes, we didn't always get along. But that doesn't mean I wanted to harm her daughter." Karen smiled bitterly. "Didn't want to. You took everything that belonged to me. They left me without money, without a home, without a family. You even tried to force me to have an abortion so that I would have nothing left." The judge frowned. "Is this true, Mrs. Martin?" Lauren jumped up. "I wanted to help her. She's too young. She can't handle a child or even herself. Isn't this logical?" "Is it logical?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "Or is it just convenient? Were you afraid that if I stayed, you would no longer be able to control my life?" Lauren clenched her teeth, but didn't say anything. The judge looked at her again. "Mrs. Martin, the documents show that over the past 2 years, large purchases have been made from Karen's funds, expensive furniture, payment for your son's education, a trip to Europe. You claim that all the money was spent on her. Explain how these expenses relate to her needs." Lauren bit her lip as a rumble of surprise went through the courtroom. DCFS spokeswoman Janet Crawford looked dumbfounded. We didn't know about it." The judge put the documents aside and fixed a hard look on Lauren. "I see systematic violation of guardianship duties, financial fraud, and perhaps even fraud. Mrs. Martin, do you have one excuse?" Lauren closed her eyes, as if she hoped that if she didn't answer, the whole nightmare would just go away. But the judge has already made her opinion. She looked at Karen. "Are you ready to take responsibility for your life?" Karen raised her head. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm already doing this." The judge nodded. "Fine. Then we move on to making a decision." Chapter 5, Court Decision. There was tense silence in the courtroom. Karen sat motionless, her heart beating so loudly that it seemed that it could be heard in this oppressive silence. Lauren Martin, her former guardian, was pale. Her lips were tightly compressed, and her eyes darted around the hall as if looking for salvation. Judge Jessica Rivers, keeping her cool, flipped through the documents in front of her, then folded her hands on the table and looked at the participants in the trial. The court listened to the arguments of the parties, considered the evidence presented, and came to a final decision. Lauren shrugged her shoulders nervously, but remained silent. Karen clenched her hands into fists, waiting. The judge paused, then spoke. In this case, it was established that the plaintiff, Karen Paulson, had reached the age of 16 and had been self-supporting for a long time, living separately from her guardian. She works, receives a stable income, and is able to independently make decisions regarding her life. The judge turned her gaze to Lauren Martin. The defendant, Lauren Martin, as a guardian, did not properly perform the duties assigned to her by law. Funds intended to support Karen Paulson were misused. There have been cases of financial abuse, which is documented. In addition, it was established that Karen was forced to live in conditions unacceptable for her age and did not receive sufficient care from her guardian. The judge paused and then said her final words. Taking into account all the above facts, the court decides to satisfy Karen Paulson's claim and recognize her as fully competent. She is declared emancipated, which means that from now on she has the right to independently manage her life, finances, and rights without the participation of a guardian. There was a quiet noise in the hall. Karen had a hard time comprehending what she had heard. She took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. She won. She was free. The judge continued. In addition, the court issues a private determination against the Department of Children and Family Services (DCFS) for inadequate supervision of the situation. The guardianship authorities did not properly check Karen Paulson's living conditions, did not verify the intended use of her funds, and actually violated her rights. Within a month, DCFS is required to provide the court with a report on the measures taken on this issue. Janet Crawford, a DCFS spokeswoman, nodded slightly, her face grim. She understood that their organization would now be under scrutiny. The judge turned her gaze back to Lauren. Miss Martin, additional checks will be carried out on you. Your management of the ward's funds raises serious legal questions. The court forwards the materials of this case to the prosecutor's office for further consideration. Lauren sat up straight. What? But I was just trying to help. Her voice trembled. The judge did not change her expression. Your actions will be considered separately. At this point, the court session is declared closed. The dull blow of the hammer sounded like a seal placed on the fate of everyone present. Karen sat there, still not fully believing what was happening. Realization came only when the bailiff gestured that she could leave the hall. She stood up and looked around. Lauren Martin sat with her head bowed, her clenched fists resting on her knees. The woman no longer looked confident that she was right. Karen stepped towards the exit, feeling a lightness that she had not experienced for a long time. Now she was free. There was a new life ahead without fear, without control, without the need to fight for the right to be yourself. She took the last step beyond the threshold of the courtroom and, raising her head, smiled. Now everything is in her hands. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing.